Tony Schultz, how are you, my
Like,
friend? It's good to have you. Let's get this party started.
let's do it.
So, you said something fascinating, which we were having a conversation offline. Tony said something that just spurred on a whole thought process, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is a great podcast topic. We got to do it." So here we are. And Tony, you said something to the effect of, "How did pollution become macho?" Like, break that down for me if you could. What? Yeah, I'm paraphrasing. So
Well, I'm just thinking, how did the right seem to co-opt the idea that polluting, being anti-environmental, as macho, and not. And in addition to that, how did they get us all to think that because of those kind of regulations, it's job killers, it's anti-American, and it's not macho. It's somehow being a wussy or something like that. I never quite understood how they were able to do that. And you have to give them credit for that's a pretty good sales job. You really suckered a lot of people with that one.
great job, right? I mean, so who doesn't love salmon, a redwood tree, clean air, a beautiful mountain stream, right? But I've actually been called, Tony, like a liberal, pansy ass tree hugger. And and this cracks me up because, like, okay, so you're insulting me because I'm appreciative of the clean air I'm breathing and the clean water that I can drink.
Somehow that's a bad thing.
How does that make me some pussy liberal tree hugger? Blah blah blah. And I, you know what? Now I embrace these labels. Like, somebody calls me a tree hugger, my chest gets a little puffed out. I'm like, yeah, damn straight I am. Yeah, I am.
It's the whole thing, David, where capitalism as opposed to socialism. Somehow socialism means you're less than a man or something. It's not macho
You
because I
need
guess they're
help.
looking for you need help or something like that. And it goes back to some of the things that we always talk about, the sales job that people have done on us. I mean, it's like right up there with McDonald's, Coca-Cola, and De Beers Diamonds. How did they get us to think the way they want us to think?
Thank you
It's a
for mentioning
it's
De
amazing.
Beers. Can we do a little tangent, little side route on De Beers right now, just to break that down for people, because there may be
It,
people
it's your
listening who
show,
aren't
buddy.
aware.
You're the host of this show.
So yeah, I just give me a little breakdown on De Beers for the people that don't know.
De Beers Diamond, and I don't have a whole lot of a major timeline on this, but somehow De Beers got us to all believe that diamonds means love, means marriage. You got to buy diamonds. And it's a beautiful gem, but it's incredibly expensive. And well, how did that get to be standard? How did that get to be a must-have? Just they were able to pull that off, and one of the great marketing coups of all time.
One thing I would like to add to that, Tony, if you don't mind, is it's so they're manipulating the law of supply and demand, because diamonds. So what dictates something's value? It's scarcity, right?
Yeah, that's one thing, definitely.
The harder, like, following the rule of supply and demand. When something is in high demand and low supply, the price goes up, right?
Hmm.
So here we have diamonds. Dude, they're a dime a dozen, but we've been brainwashed to think that they're very, very, very rare. But what it is this family that you just mentioned, the De Beers family. I believe they're Danish.
Couldn't
So
tell you.
this has been going on since like 17, 1800, something crazy, right? So they have a monopoly on the diamond market and are price fixing. So diamonds would be would be, like an opal is a very valuable stone. Why? Because they're rare. Diamonds are not rare at all. And they would just be rocks if it wasn't for the fact that the De Beers family is limiting the flow to the market. So they trickle the supply into the market to keep the price high. But meanwhile, they've got tons of them that they're keeping on ice because they can't let them into the market or it'll drop the price.
It'll drop the price, right?
So it's this total artificial manipulation of the market that's been, our whole lives and then some, like our grandparents' lives, right?
Well, when I heard about the whole De Beers thing, as far as their marketing, I remember thinking to myself, I never even thought there was a time when that wasn't the thing to do. Like when you get married or to show wealth and to show class, and you had diamonds, right? I
Right.
mean, I didn't know there was a time before that. Apparently there was.
Right. Wow. There was a time before diamonds, a
Like
time before De Beers.
weren't the standard for this. Like now any woman that gets married expect a diamond wedding ring, right?
Well, you know what
It's
I,
always a diamond ring now, isn't it?
yeah. Well, what I think is really cool, a new trend that has started, and I can credit the millennials with bringing this one along, is now people are getting tattoos.
Really?
So they'll get a ring tattooed on their finger, but how much did it cost us? $400 for both of them. Right? And it to me, it says even more because you can't take that motherfucker off.
Well, not without a laser.
Right, exactly. Not without a laser, another $400 and a bunch of paint.
Ouch.
That's gonna hurt. So, right, where the no more slipping your wedding ring off to go bang this chick, right? Like, no, that's out the window. You're committed, motherfucker.
I just think, when I look at some of these con jobs, really, that how some of these folks actually get away with this. And, you got to give them credit for, making us think this is what we have to have, and again, Dave, go back to that whole right wing con job of, if you're an environmentalist, somehow you're kind of a pussy. That's pussyish, and it just makes absolutely no sense because, like you said, clean air and clean water. Don't we all need that?
Yeah, don't
Where's the benefit of dirty air and dirty water? That doesn't help anybody.
no cancer and health ailments due to pollution is a benefit for nobody, right?
Absolutely.
And the thing with these things is it's like we're experiencing now with COVID-19. There is no boundary, there is no limit, right? So if you have the most fucked up healthcare system of any, industrialized nation in the world, oh, guess what? We set ourselves up for this situation. Well, guess what? If you pollute, you're setting yourself up for cancer rates that are going through the roof and da da da. And you're dependent on which way the wind blows to make sure that you don't get cancer.
It's crazy.
Right.
It's absolutely insane.
I mean,
And
in 2020, I feel like we're living on such a small planet because of our expanding knowledge, right? And knowledge of the universe, our solar system, the universe, pollution, global warming, all this shit. But we're not slowing down how we fuck this place up. Like
it's yeah. I mean, it's just one of those things where I can't really wrap my head around it.
thank you.
Because
Thank you. That's
these
the
things
best way to
actually,
describe it is that's why I brain farted and I just froze because I was in the middle of a sentence and I'm like, where do you even go with this? Right?
well, it's the whole idea, Dave, that science doesn't matter, expertise doesn't matter, facts don't matter, history doesn't matter. And we're seeing this in such a huge way with the Trump administration right now. We saw it in something that is so unbelievably consequential with this pandemic. Science didn't matter. He fired a bunch of people that were working in the administration left over from the Obama years to help with what do you do when there's a pandemic?
It was
Trump
actually
didn't need anything.
a group that Obama had set up. Um, Bush had laid the track work. Bush Jr., good old Georgie, said he said something. Unless we're prepared for a pandemic in advance, we'll never be able to react in time. So, according to that speech, and I just saw this week, according to that speech that Bush made, Obama enacted this and put a strike force in place, a pandemic strike force. So you're exactly right. Trump disbanded that strike force because they were quote unquote needed. But the whole reason they were put in place is because unless you have them in place beforehand, you're fucked.
Well, I imagine their mission statement is to stay abreast of the situation where these breakouts might be occurring, coordinated with health organizations around the world to know if it's happening here, where is it spreading, how do we put a stop to it, and all these types of things. And then even with Trump getting rid of all those people, Dave, he was still briefed that the situation was occurring. These certain things need to be done, and he chose to ignore them.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've heard, but Fox News, who were really parroting what the president was saying, was doing that themselves, and they are actually being sued now. I understand.
Wow.
Because of putting people's lives in danger.
About time, huh? Fox News getting a lawsuit. That's all.
Where that's going to go, I have no idea. But, and again, Dave, these are the kind of things that cannot be, you can't have an opinion on this. They said those things. It's on tape. We heard Trish Regan say that this was, just something to get the president. We heard the same thing uttered by Sean Hannity. It's another impeachment hoax. Okay, and now you've got all these people, Dave, that are already, they've been greased for so long to you can't trust the media. Ooh, those scientists, what do they know? They're just a bunch of Green New Deal people, right?
Right.
Green Revolution people. So what do they know?
Whole circle back to tree huggers. Yeah, they're just a bunch of pussies. What do they know?
Okay.
And there again. Let me just clarify that. The fact that we use oh, what a pussy as somebody that or something that is weak, shouldn't it be what a dick? Because if you want to compare the strength of something, you can stretch a pussy a mile and it ain't going to tear an inch. And I think that's a Bill Cosby quote. But dicks are very fragile. Very fragile. And they got those balls hanging below them, which are even more fragile. You just touch those things too hard and they freaking hurt for a half hour.
However you want to label it, but I mean, I've been accused of being a wuss because I drive the speed limit and I don't need to speed up to the car in front of me. Yeah. I'm driving down the highway.
How come you're not risking your life, you pussy?
And I looked at my friend who said this. His name will not be mentioned, but I'm like, are you kidding?
You could throw a first name out. Let's just not do last names.
Well, it's my friend Ron, and he says this to me, and I'm like, I'm sorry, it's somehow manly to zoom right up to the next car?
Yeah.
I don't get that.
And then
I just want to get to the place I'm supposed to get to alive.
Yeah. And then if you do zoom up to the car in front of you, you're that asshole that's tailgating them. Right? Motherfucker, what did I do? Get off my ass. Pass me. Right?
You know, I mean, one thing I hope that you and I, David, I know we're not getting a tremendous amount of listeners at this point, but hopefully this
Tony,
our listenership will grow. And what I would like to get people to understand, though, David, is science
we're
matters.
up to
And I,
seven
you always want
listeners.
to see now if they tell two friends and they tell two,
No, I'm telling you, there's a
um,
storm taking off. We have 75 listens and seven listeners. So exactly, if they
you
each
know,
tell two people,
I hope, and I just want us to be able to make sure that, this whole thing about uniting, rallying around our president is wonderful. We're in a time of crisis, but we still cannot forget the response and the whole lag up until today. It's still this way, Dave.
yeah.
You know,
Can I comment
when
on that
he's
for a sec?
sure, please.
So, one of my dear friends has just embraced Jesus, which is a little hard. Which
Okay.
is a little hard for me, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like a heavy metal buddy, my buddy Howie. You know Howie,
I
yeah.
do.
Um, Singer for an awesome punk rock band, the Earwigs. We practiced in the same space for when I was in Bad Karma. The Earwigs and we shared a drummer and a practice space for 3 years. So, a lot of time spent together. He's a good man, but when things get hard, people start looking to places, right? And I just want to preface this with I got nothing to say negative about any of you that are religious, whatever. You do you, whatever works for you. Awesome. My father was a minister. The reason I'm not religious and the reason I hold animosity against organized, and I'll specify organized religion, is because I saw the hypocrisy within the church. Friends of my father's that I saw on a personal basis, and then I saw them in the church. I saw that hypocrisy firsthand, and yeah, so I'm just going to leave it at that. I saw that hypocrisy firsthand. So anyway, I love my buddy Howie, but he said, we can't get political in a time like this. Kind of adding on, building on what you just said. And Tony, okay, so yeah, let's not create further reasons to divide. However, this is not a time to just put on blinders and accept what we're told. You always need to maintain critical thinking, especially in important times.
I think it's absolutely a necessity for what's going on now, how we move forward, and not to mention, we have to learn from our
Thank you.
mistakes. We have to what went right and what went wrong, and that's why we pay attention to history, Dave. And for folks out there who don't care about history, I totally understand. And this war happened on this date. It doesn't seem like it has a whole lot of relevance, but there are aspects of history that have a lot of relevance, and how we deal with and how we dealt with pandemics in the past. I'd say that's pretty relevant right now.
Super relevant. And how we've dealt with fascism in the past, how fascism has risen up in what was a democratic nation, right? This has happened time and time and time again. It's happening here now, and nobody's talking about it, Tony.
No, I mean, I can look right now and just go back in this administration, and even earlier administrations, where more and more power is given to the executive
Yep.
branch, and once that power is there, the next guy doesn't really want to get rid of it either.
Thank you. I just
Right?
saw a documentary on Obama, and it was talking about how Obama did not usurp the presidential powers that George Bush demanded under Wartime Act. He's like,
Right.
hey, I kind of
Obama,
like this. I think I'll just, yeah. So he did. He kept all those powers and then expanded on them.
and then you come into Trump, and all of a sudden, Dave, it's like, oh, you're being investigated. Oh, who's leading this investigation? You're fired. Okay. And that's just that's just okay. And then getting congressional subpoenas. Well, I always understood that you just had to show up. But what I've learned in the interim, Dave,
It's
is
a request.
it's kind of the honor system on that. There's no mechanism in place. Congress doesn't control the military, right? They don't have a police force. They can't go and drag the president to testify. Like if you're just a regular person, then yeah, I guess they can go after you,
Now,
but they can't
now
with the
explain
president.
that to me, Tony, because this is where I get lost. You and I do this shit. There's a fucking knock at the door. If you don't answer it, there's a battering ram through your door. You're zip tied, hog tied, carried away, maybe in the middle of the night. And this has happened to a fucking reporter, Max Blumenthal. This happened to a reporter recently, Tony, this year. Taken away, middle of the night, 3, 4 in the morning. You're like, oh, fuck, where am I going? Oh, thank God, not going to Guantanamo. Okay, we're good. Going to a local police station. Thank God, right? But really? Really? We're tolerating this. And I want to specify, you and I, it's not a personality fair. I don't give a fuck who the president is. Trump, fucking Biden. If anybody is usurping this power over the people, that's the person we need to worry about. Trump is just a symptom of the problem, right? Obama was, horrible. Biden is horrible. Like any of those people that are on the top echelon, they're horrible, right?
To a certain degree.
Who's
I
the
mean,
most?
I don't see Obama as horrible as you do, but I think you and I both established through our conversations over the years that we are not on a team,
No.
right? We you've heard me criticize Obama on plenty of different things and why I would grade him higher or grade him lower as a president for certain things that
Would
he
you
did.
give him an overall grade?
I would say he's a C plus B minus.
I give him a D.
Okay. So there's definitely some disagreement.
But that's not that thick, right? C, you said C plus, C minus?
C plus to a B minus.
Okay, so we're going from C plus to D. So that's a little bit of a stretch, but that's not huge.
No.
And the reason I would give him that rating, Tony, is because of the promises and the delivery, right? He fucking lifted us up so high with the promises, right?
Oh, he's really overrated. He's a disappointing president.
I call him a Trojan horse. I think he promised us everything we needed. He gave us everything we needed to hear. Won with a landslide. And then he reneged on all of it.
On most of it, I would say. I mean, there are certain those aspects. For the first thing for me is he just didn't get us out of those wars.
Well,
and the bailouts didn't help either, even though it was a big part of getting the country back on track, and I give him a lot of credit for that. It didn't go to where it's supposed to go. It's kind of like these new bailouts that we have now, Dave, where if a lot of money is going to the people who need it, I think thumbs up for that. But if there's that huge percentage, big chunk of it that's going to corporations and basically to the corporations and people who need it the least, why are we doing that?
Right.
That just doesn't make any sense.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Like currently.
Yeah. Well, let me just finish this point really quick. In Obama's case, all the bank bailouts, and it was great that the things got paid back. Obamacare was paid for. The TARP money paid back. The auto industry survived and now is thriving and has been thriving. Those are great. But all the people had to lose their
10 million.
homes. So bankers could get a better
10 million
deal.
people.
That was like, yeah, I mean, I have to downgrade him on that. And he just doesn't look progressive enough with
Can I
those type of those
can I,
type of
can I chime
policies.
on
Go
that
ahead.
just real quick? I don't
Yeah,
want to dwell
sure.
on Obama or the bailout or the 2008 bailout or anything,
Right,
but
right.
I just want to touch on that because I think we're 90% in agreement here. Where I have a real problem with Obama is not the wars. I mean, that's atrocious and horrible, but it didn't feel like I got totally just like gutted. What got me, Tony,
Hmm.
was the bailouts. Like, really, you're going to bail out the people who created this system. And let's backpedal a little bit. So, Bill Clinton deregulated the banks. He removed what was called the Glass-Steagall Act, which prevented investment
Right,
banks from doing normal banking. So now the lines are blurred. Wells Fargo, where you deposit
right.
your money, can now take that money and do high risk investment banking
They can
and
gamble with your money,
potentially
Dave,
lose the fucking house.
and also, David, they don't have there was a mechanism in there that said they had to have enough money behind them while they were gambling with other money. And that became like, okay, they don't have to have that money behind them. Like in case something screws up, you save for a rainy day type of thing. Getting rid of Glass-Steagall also got rid of that as well. So they were able to just, okay, I'm gonna be highly leveraged and I'm gonna gamble. And then when you come up snake eyes, the whole house
Right, which
caves
is
in.
even worse.
There's nothing to fall
Which
back
is
on.
even worse. So let's backpedal a little further more even. So our banking system is known as what's called fractional reserve banking. What that means is the bank only has to have a fractional amount of the deposits on reserve.
Yes, that's what I was
So
talking
this
about
is
right
sketchy,
there. Go
but this
ahead.
has been going on for hundreds of years. Since before the Great Depression, and we've never fixed it. And this is the ultimate evil with our banking system, Tony. So they only have to maintain 10%. So you deposit $100, they only have to keep $10. They can now give a loan for $90. So you deposit 100, they loan out 90, but they only have 10. So if you come back for your 100, they're short 90. If that other person loses their ass, they're short 90. So they're actually risking 180% and they only have 10.
Crazy.
It's monopoly money crazy, Tony. Like the people that
Yeah.
made up this game, and it is a game, like, right? Because it's the shell game all of a sudden, right? Like, no, motherfucker, I have my $100,000 life savings with you. Oh, sorry. Here's 10 grand. What? What? I worked for the water company for 30 years. I retired. I got my pension. I got my life. Nope. Here's 10 grand. I'm like, what? And
It's just
and that
basic common sense, Dave, and they don't have
that's
to
if it's
abide by it.
federally insured. Like, holy shit. So
Right.
my ire with Obama goes to that point. That he had the
Mm-hmm.
option, and oh God, I wish I had this clip at my fingertips right now. But there's a clip of Obama's I think it was the head of the Treasury, and he's saying, "Mr. President, their chests are bare. You have to strike and bury a spear while you can." And he said, and then his next follow up sentence was, "They're all debt merchants anyway. So all they do is make money off of debt. They're not creating anything. They don't create a product. They're not helping anything. They're just making money off of debt." Right? And that is a construct because I think you and I agree, if there's nothing created, you created no value. So how could you create worth without a thing? Right?
Pretty
Pretty
good at
fucking
it.
good at it. So
They're
that's
really
what
good
gets
at
me about Obama, is that he had the fucking chance to dig the dagger through the hearts of these evil, monopolistic, too big to exist banks. And now
it. And he let them
he
off.
paid them off. He could have paid off every single homeowner and allowed those homeowners to continue paying their mortgage. And then if the homeowners were paying the mortgage, wouldn't the banks have been okay?
It sounds like that would have worked out better for everybody, but apparently, when you do it the way they did it, very few people reap the vast majority of the benefits.
Thank you.
And that's where we are now. And if for our listeners out there, if you really want to tune into this, PBS series Frontline has done a wonderful, wonderful profile of the Obama administration. And it really breaks this down really well, and it tells you that they had those bankers, Dave. They were afraid. They were afraid of huge fines. They were afraid of more regulation, and they were afraid
For the
of going
first
to
time
jail.
since the Great Depression,
and none of those things
they were afraid.
And the fines, when they sounded fairly substantial, like they big numbers, but they weren't the numbers that really made the bankers afraid. And basically, David, it came down to a situation of the cost of doing business, right? It's like, you got to commute to work, but it's a good job. It takes you a little more time, costs you a little more money, but it's the cost of doing business. It's totally worth it. And that's what happened to the bankers. And when you get to a situation like that, Dave, it's like, well, if we're not going to be penalized for these things, and they really benefit us to do this, what's to make us not do it again? It's like, if I rob a bank, Dave, and I get away with $100,000, and they catch me and they fine me $10,000, why won't I just rob a bank again?
Thank you.
It
Thank
just
you.
doesn't
If
make
the penalty
sense.
does not make it prohibitive, does not make that activity prohibitive, and i.e., my example is the BP disaster, the Deep Horizon disaster in the Gulf of Mexico. I think they were fined, not even $100 million, right? So
Yeah, these guys, like, what is that?
Put them out of
That's
business.
Like, what,
It
$50
didn't
for
even it didn't even touch their yearly profits for that year, right? So unless you're going to take somebody's profits and make them fucking feel it, that no.
Well, if you're in a situation, Dave, where the economy collapses, it has a major drain on the world's economy, because it's like if California goes under, Dave, what happens to the rest of the country? If America goes under, well, what happens to the rest of the world? Because we're so interconnected with these things. When you have a situation, that grave, of that magnitude, and you catch these people and they've actually done some things wrong, how can you just let them off the hook? How can you not?
You have me, Tony. You have me. I mean, that's where I start saying we're slipping towards fascism, because the will of the corporations are usurping everything else. And here we are with that clip that I was referring to. So this is a clip from Oliver Stone's Untold History of the United States, Bush and Obama in the Age of Terror. This was a 10-part series on Showtime that was adopted from a book, and Oliver Stone directed this series. But here is a quote referring to Obama having the chance to slay these too big to fail banks. He had the chance to let them fail, and he chose not to. And here's what the head of the Federal Reserve said.
Former Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker urged Obama to act.
Right now, when you have your chance and their breasts are bared, you need to put a spear through the heart of all these guys on Wall Street that for years have been mostly debt merchants.
But it didn't happen. The bailout.
But it didn't happen. And the numbers that I've heard are that with the money that Obama gave the banks, he could have if he would have given that to homeowners, it would have paid off every single mortgage in the country. Imagine that. Now you've got no mortgage and all that. So you're either going to invest, you're going to buy more stuff, you know. Imagine the stimulus to the economy. And if all these people stayed in their houses and continued to pay their mortgage because they didn't lose their ass, well then wouldn't most of the banks been fine because everybody would have been paying them? It would have only been a couple banks that would have failed. And we had the chance to let them fail. But anyway, thank you for tuning in. This has been Dave Smith with And Another Thing with Dave. Thanks for tuning in. So we're up to 8 platforms now. Pretty excited about that. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. I've also got a podcast on YouTube, a video podcast. It's a more abbreviated version. I like to do the long form here on the audio, but you can check out my podcast on YouTube, And Another Thing with Dave. And I also started a group on Facebook, Progressives Unite. So it's got a picture of an American flag with a peace symbol. So you can join that if you want to keep further abreast of progressive news. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. Please feel free to, if you're on Anchor.fm, you can leave a 1-minute audio comment, and I will include that in the podcast. Otherwise, please leave comments. Peace out. Keep fighting.